Welcome to Stork'd, the podcast, in which we explore the many ways to build and define family. This is Julia, your host, and I'm so excited with this interview with Sydney Sharon to introduce someone who is just like a ball of radiance. This is sunshine in a bottle. I walked away from my conversation with Sydney just like grinning from ear to ear. She has built a really beautiful family with her wife, claiming a Jewish identity, and now currently going through an IVF process for reciprocal IVF. But here's the really interesting thing. In addition to being this incredible voice of building your family your way, Sydney is also the intersection of all things donor conceived. And many of you know that some of the conversations I have with people are rooted in their own stories, and some are also rooted in my quest to figure out my life. And one of my big questions is, how is my kiddo going to feel as a donor conceived munchkin? What's it going to be like for him if he were to connect with his siblings? Well, to some extent, Sydney has the answer for me and for anyone else who has donor-conceived children, because Sydney has used donor sperm to conceive her 2 children. She also discovered that her dad was a donor, so she's the child of a donor. And then through that process, she's connected with her siblings who were donor-conceived. So this woman has the intersection of everything donor-conceived, and it really is just a great insight into rolling forward the future of any of our donor-conceived babies, what it might be like for them to connect with their family, to connect with their siblings, to build this big, miraculous, joyful community that extends beyond the family in which you were raised. I love this episode, not just because of the content. It is great content, but also because it gave me some hope for what my baby can expect in the future. I hope you enjoyed as much as I enjoyed it, both the having of it and the presenting of it to you. And if you do, please don't forget to like us, give a good review wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, etc. If you really love us, share it with friends, and then sign up for our newsletter because it's a pretty great newsletter. Thank you, and here is Sydney. Welcome to Stork'd, the podcast, where we discuss all the many ways people build and define family. I am so excited to have you, Sydney. I know we're going to have a really amazing conversation. Before we dive into all things fertility, donor conception, building families in many, many, many special and unique ways, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your family looks like right now?
Yeah, so my name is Sydney Sharon. I am married to my perfect, beautiful wife, Britt. We are currently the very proud parents of 2 donor-conceived kids. Thea is almost 3.5, and Nathan is about 2. And we are in the middle of our reciprocal IVF process for baby number 3, because we are both crazy and madly in love with family and our children. And I'm excited to share our story. We this all kind of started because of our first child. We decided that we wanted to kind of leave love notes behind, and we thought Instagram would kind of be the perfect place to leave notes with pictures. And we've documented our fertility journey ever since on Instagram. And here we are today, 2 kids later, hopefully one on the way very soon.
Oh, fingers crossed on that one. And let's talk about that a little bit. You currently are working towards your 3rd baby. And this one, you're not doing IUI for, you're doing reciprocal IVF.
Yes.
Which means that, well, what does that mean? Tell our audience.
So reciprocal IVF is when we did an egg retrieval on my wife. So we harvested Britt's eggs. She did an egg retrieval. We made embryos with the same donor sperm, and I am going to be the one to carry. So we're doing a frozen embryo transfer in me on Friday. So in 72 hours, I will be pregnant until proven otherwise. And, I obviously manage all these social accounts. So I'm so tuned into the fertility community, and, everybody's like, I'm PUPO, pregnant until proven otherwise. When you're going through it, what an intense headspace to be in. This just emotionally, physically, mentally feels so different. You're transferring an embryo. So you're pregnant when they transfer it until you're not. When we had our consultation with our coordinator, we were in Canada last week, and she goes, if you miss any of your estrogen doses or any of your progesterone shots, you will miscarry. Your transfer is next Friday. Your pregnancy test is scheduled for June 6th. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like, what?
Yeah, that's really heavy.
So yeah, the first shot, the needle, while I was shaking like a leaf up in the air, in a very tiny bathroom where they're like, just relax one leg.
Yeah.
You relax one leg.
Yeah.
Either it's the swelling of the body when you're, 10,000 feet up, or my shaky hand, or maybe I didn't insert it right. That injection site is like this big and red and bruised. The other 2 shots that my wife has done on me, you can't see anything.
Your body knows something major is going on here, right? Like it's not, there's so much wisdom in our bodies. They're like, I don't know what's happening.
Science is definitely super duper cool.
Tell us about the rest of your journey to the family that you currently have.
So, I've known I've wanted to be pregnant since I was like 2. Like, I knew I wanted to be a mom. A lot of my friends, we were all pregnant at the same time. And after they gave birth, they're like, I don't know who I am anymore. And I don't know who my identity is. Like, I'm only mom. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So I feel fulfilled now in life. I did it. Like, this is all I've wanted. And Britt was never actually so sure she would have kids. Thought the idea of breastfeeding was cool, but not so much pregnancy. So for our relationship, choosing who is going to go first was a no-brainer. I thought we were going to go straight into IVF to guarantee a pregnancy. First of all, Britt and I have known each other since we were 16. We met when we were 16 in high school. I was like, she's kind of weird. Like, I know she exists, but she's not in my little group of high school friends. And by senior year, she became part of my group of senior friends. We both did the same study abroad program between high school and college in Israel. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Like, I was just like, oh, well, we just have to be best friends.
So you had this like vision of heading to Israel and having this.
I just knew. I had never, it's funny when I tell this story, I had never come out as straight growing up. Straight people don't come out. It's kind of like, our legal system, like you're straight until proven not. And I never felt weird or uncomfortable in my body, or like society was demanding something of me or standard. I never felt any of that, but I grew up in a really perfect home. Like, my parents, you just don't get better than the parents that I have. Everything is safe. Your feelings are valid. Your feelings are safe. Wherever your mind needs to go is exactly where it should be. My mom's a psychologist. So I grew up in a really mentally, physically, emotionally stable, beautiful home.
I love that.
And then after our year in Israel, Britt came back home to California and went to school. I went to school in Maryland. We were chatting every day. I was miserable. I was a very big fish in a small pond, which was usually my comfort zone. But something changed in Israel. I got more comfortable being with people and not necessarily being a big fish in a small pond, and figuring myself out as you do in college. So I transferred back home. Britt and I wound up at the same school, and we started hanging out all the time. And our combined future maid of honor at the time said, "What is going on with you two?" And I was like, "Nothing." And she goes, "That ain't nothing." I had a kiss with Britt, and like 6-7 years later, we got married. So not the route I thought I was going to live. I thought I was going to go to college, meet a guy, go from my parents' home to his home, be a Susie homemaker, give him all the babies, be a stay-at-home mom. Life is going to be great. I did not anticipate falling in love with a woman. I did not anticipate creating a career for myself. I did not anticipate being in a 2-income home where we're both breadwinners. None of this. You tell me this when I'm 16, 18, 20, I would not have believed you.
It's such an interesting pivot, because so many stories start with, I felt like I couldn't be me. And you say, I was totally myself. And then all of a sudden I fell in love with a woman. And that's really fascinating.
And I still don't know how I identify. And that part's really hard for me, because I feel like now, like in 2022, everybody's like, the amount of terms and genders or non-genders and identifications. And I was just like, can't we just love who we love and like be done? Like, does it have to be more complicated than that? Because it's really that uncomplicated for me. So part of me sometimes feels like I'm a fraud in the LGBTQ community. part of me feels like a fraud being in the infertility community because I didn't have any infertility, but I was missing sperm. So I needed to go to a fertility doctor. Yeah. But my community that loves me, my family, my chosen family, the family I'm creating, like they don't give two shits about it. And there's nothing for me to have to prove to anybody. But when I talk about our fertility journey, I'm just always like, oh. I dealt with a lot of the emotion part of it and figuring out finances and things like that. But when it came to physically making the babies, it wasn't that difficult. And that hurts my heart because so many people that I know struggle. Yeah. So many people that I don't know struggle. And my empathy bone just like breaks every time.
Yeah. Yeah. So of the identities that you currently wear now, the spokesperson for the infertility community, the spokesperson for gay parenting in some ways, or LGBTQ parenting, somebody who is a dual income breadwinner and really a powerhouse at it. Which one feels like the most natural? Like this is me.
Mom. That is the one I identify like to my DNA with. Mom and wife. I'm a really good wife too. But like my roles of building our home and building our family and having people call me mommy, while sometimes I do want to change my name, those are the ones that identify with me the most. And then second to that, I really think, I can't hide that I'm married to a woman and we have kids. You see us out and like, while some people may not know, I'm not hiding it. But the thing that I think is kind of second to that is our Judaism. I think my connection to my religion and my faith has shocked and surprised me.
Okay. That's really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I went to a Jewish day camp. I went to a Jewish sleepaway camp. I went to Israel for my first year of college. And I did go to a Jewish day school growing up through 8th grade. I did my bat mitzvah, the whole 9 yards. It wasn't until Britt and I got engaged where we finally decided on a venue, which was our temple. We have a female rabbi and a gay man cantor, because welcome to Malibu. And she is a pioneer for women's rights. And when I spoke with her to tell her I was engaged and, if she would do my wedding, she goes, "Oh, great. Are you getting married at the temple?" And I was like, "I'm going to get back to you on that." And the more that I thought about it, the more I was just like, this is where we're meant to be. And throughout our year of engagement of meeting with her and planning our wedding, I realized how important a lot of the traditions are to us. And it was probably in that year that being Jewish wasn't like something my parents put on me, or like I didn't have to go to temple because my mom was making me. Like this was a full-blown choice. This was a full-blown grown-up choice of like, this is what I want. Britt and I want to have a Jewish home. We want to raise Jewish kids. Gosh, I mean, from our wedding to our ketubah to I went into, I don't know if you know what a mikveh is, but I went into the mikveh the week that I got in the week of our wedding. I went into the mikveh when I was 9 months pregnant with Thea. I wanted to do it.
Would you mind defining mikveh for those of our audience who are not familiar with it?
Yeah. So the mikveh it's essentially a bath, and it's used for the purpose of ritual in Judaism. So like some women, every time they start their cycle, they'll go into the mikveh. When you get engaged and get married, when you have a baby, if you're like for conversions. So it's a ritual bath, and there's some prayers you can say depending on how religious you are, but it is a really like pristine moment in time where it's just you floating in this water, either saying prayers out loud or not, believing in whoever you believe in. I feel like it's kind of like childbirth. Like when you're pushing a baby out, it's kind of like that like there's this moment of like, can earth get any closer to heaven? I don't even know if I believe in heaven, but like, that's what I think it feels like.
That's really cool. That's a really cool description. Yeah.
I don't know how many people are going to agree with me on that. It's an intimate moment.
But that's the thing about spirituality. People don't have to agree with your felt spiritual experience.
And I think that's why I love my Judaism, because my Judaism for both Britt and me are so spiritually based. We're not so steadfast in old school tradition, but the culture, the food, the music, the tastes, the sounds, the experiences, Israel, it's just so spiritual for us. And I love that. So I think after being a mom and wife, my Judaism is a really big part of my backbone of how I identify, which is crazy that I'm like, ask me this when I was 9 and I'd be like, pfft.
Well, you know what? I love podcasts about families, right? We're talking about like, who is your family and how is it composed and how do you feel about it? And the subtext, the layer that is connecting all families is how do you feel about your self-identity in relationship with your family? And so this Jewishness is really important in the context of that. I also am curious, believe it or not, I'm also a Jew. People don't see that in me because I don't look like your traditional Jewish person, if you apply stereotypes. But one of the things I have always felt is true for Judaism, and maybe this is like a reverse stereotype, is I think it is a very open-minded religion. Do you think it has enabled you to create the family you want in any specific way? Or,
you know, one of the questions that we get asked a lot on our platform is, how did you choose, or how were you able to be both Jewish and gay? And I was just like, it was never an either or question for us. That wasn't in a realm of possibility for us. It was just both. It's just who we are. We never, I mean, look, we live in Los Angeles. We live in a progressive state. We are a part of a religion that I think is on the more progressive side. So like, we live in a bubble, but it's my really safe, liberal, progressive, accepting bubble. I never felt like I had to choose. I never felt, my religion was never a part of us choosing how or when or why we were going to make a family.
well, let's talk about choices for a second, because we've been talking about the choice of identity, the choice of Jewishness, the choice of your amazing spouse and wife. But one of the major choices you had to make was in choosing a donor. Can you talk a little bit about like, how did you find the person that would be one half of the genetic material for your kids?
Yeah. Britt and I were meant to be together. Let me start by saying that, because, gosh, if our life was recorded, the amount of dollars you would have of us saying this next part, it would be exorbitant. Britt and I could not be more different. She's an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I know how to play an extrovert when I have to. Her interests and likes are very different than mine. Both like in present day and like, even if you looked at like how we grew up, you know, in our childhood, the things that we are unwavering and completely aligned with are our beliefs, our values. And, when it came time to choosing a donor, actually first what we did is we had to choose a sperm bank, and we chose California Cryobank. And this was kind of like our doctor choice. We didn't look into any other sperm banks. Growing up, my parents have some friends who are in the LGBTQ community. So they're my parents' age, and they have kids who are a little bit younger than me, but they were conceived using donor sperm. And they went through California Cryobank. So this sperm bank has been around for decades. I think it's one of the most reputable ones. It's one of those things where it's just like, I'm not looking into other sperm banks. Then the catalog of choosing a donor. They have hundreds of donors. And yes, you're right. It's going to make up half of my child's DNA, but I'm not marrying this person and I'm not meeting them right now.
Such an important distinction, because when I started shopping, you start thinking, okay, do I like this person? And then you realize, wait, that doesn't matter because they're not like, for me, they're for the kid.
And then you go into the whole, especially being in a same-sex couple, like you really kind of take a deep dive into the whole nurture versus nature conversation. Does the apple fall far from the tree or does it not? If their favorite animal is a gorilla, are my kids' favorite animal going to be a gorilla? I don't know. I got very overwhelmed, hundreds of choices, and they're all qualified. So I looked for like 4 months. I kept doing different searches with different filters and saving them. And even with my filters, there were still dozens and dozens of options.
So what was going through your head in those 4 months? I'm asking because I had some similar experiences. Were you trying to find your intuition and when you saw somebody say, okay, this feels right? Or were you filled with anxiety? Like, oh my God, I've got to find the right one. Like, what was the feeling state of searching this massive catalog for 4 months?
Definitely anxiety. So I am a perfectionist. And as you know, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. So how are you supposed to find a perfect donor? Are they supposed to look like me? Are they supposed to look like Britt? Should they look like a combination of us? Do I care what they look like? There's no telling what your child is going to look like. It's not just the egg DNA and the sperm DNA. It's the egg and all of the egg's DNA that came before it, and the sperm's DNA and all of the sperm's DNA that came before it. There's like 1 in a million options of what this child can look like. So do I care? How I wanted to get it right. I wanted to take the test and get an A, and that doesn't exist in this world. Lots of anxiety, lots of worry. Am I doing the right thing? Are my kids going to love me? Are they going to hate me? Who are they going to be? What questions are they going to have? How much information can I give them? Our IUI appointment, like the start of my cycle was coming. And so I threw the computer at Britt, literally threw it. She was on a bed. So the computer was safe. Britt was safe. And I was like, you find him. 20 minutes later, she was like, hey, choose between these 3 guys. What? How did we get here? How do you only have this many options? Britt being very similar to my dad and her logic and math and her spreadsheets. She was like, well, he should have my blood type or your blood type. So God forbid our kid.
I would never have thought about blood type.
Blood type.
Blood type. Okay. Okay. Keep going. Why blood type?
God forbid something happens and our kids need anything. Now I'm O positive. So I think I'm a universal giver. So we have that in the bank, no pun intended. But we wanted to make sure that if our kids come out with their blood, that it would match me or Britt. God forbid one of our kids needs something.
That is brilliant. Never thought about that.
No emotion in that.
No.
That is just like, here.
And it filters it down so much that then you can start using intuition differently. Yeah.
Yes. So we did that. And then Britt wanted this person to kind of be a combo look of the 2 of us. Fair. I think most
what does that mean for her? Like, what was she kind of thinking in the back of her head?
My whole family and Britt's whole family, we are all dark hair, all of us. There's not one person with like blonde hair. There's some like descendant redheads down the way, but for the most part, we're kind of typical Jewish looking families. We all have dark hair. So we did brown hair. That was also a no-brainer for us. We did narrow down by height. We chose a donor in the same height range as our dads and our brothers. We were left with like maybe half a dozen donors after that. Hundreds got whittled down with those. And eyes. Did we do eyes? We might not have even done eyes. I think we only did height, blood type, and hair color.
So you know what I love about this question, and I ask it to anyone who has used a donor of any kind, is there's A, no wrong way to choose a donor, and B, there's no 2 people who will do it the same. Right? Like none of the things you said are the things that I used, and yet such great logic.
Britt's the logical one in the relationship if you haven't been able to decipher that, and I'm the more emotional one. So from there, it actually was really easy. We still didn't look at characteristics. We still didn't look at personal essays or what the sperm bank thought of him or hobbies. We didn't look at any of that. After we only had like half a dozen to look through, Britt opened a tab for each of them and we looked at their medical history. I know more about my sperm donor's medical history than I know about my own family.
With the caveat of to the point at which the person donated. And some of the conversation that's happening in the donor conceived community is how to get updated medical records. But to that point, again, this catalog that I used and you used, we used different filters and it had enough information for all of us to make our decisions with different metrics, which is kind of cool.
But and look, to the point of, things coming up later in life and being able to update the sperm bank so that the sperm bank can, notify the families. There's a few things that come up for me. One is Britt and I, we're good rule followers. So part of what California Cryobank asks is that you kind of keep them up to date with your pregnancy journey. Did you get pregnant? Did you miscarry? Did you have a live birth? How many babies do you have? The more information you can give them, the more they're able to manage family limits and keep you up to date with any donor information. Now, while there are definitely some holes in the system because I've yet to meet any system that is perfect. And while it's nice to know as much as you possibly can know at any given moment, I think that there's traditional looking families of mom, dad, baby, and that they still don't know all that information. And there's no guarantees in life. And like, at what point, like you kind of have to let go and just trust and take care of your body. And then there's the whole conversation of like, well, when that DNA and my DNA meet, that creates a completely brand new person. There's a certain point where you just kind of have to accept certain unknowns because there's always going to be an unknown in any type of family unit.
And I appreciate that you're saying this as an admitted perfectionist, right? You went into this saying, I'm a perfectionist. I want the A. I want to win at picking a donor. Yeah. And now you're saying, but with anything in life, there's some things that are just going to be a little black box mystery. Can't control it. And you currently are working towards your third baby. And this one, you're not doing IUI for, you're doing.
That was also something that was important to us when we were looking at donors, is to make sure that he had enough vials so we could purchase enough vials and utilize their storage program. Because I knew I wasn't going to have like 4 kids in the next year. But I wanted the choice to be able to create my family on my timeline with the same donor. So it was important that he had enough vials.
How many vials? I'm sorry to interrupt, but this was actually one of those things I agonized over for so long. How many vials should I have? Because you're equally weighing price versus storage costs versus like future plans and how old you are and how many kids you could possibly carry and how many kids you might or might not want. Like it's just a lot. It's not even math. It's just like
a lot.
Yeah. Planning for different options. It was like imagining 10 different roadmaps.
Yeah.
And all of that goes into a choice of how many vials you purchase. How did you think about that?
So, again, this was pretty easy for us also. When we, so first of all, I think the customer service at California Cryobank is beyond extraordinary.
I'm going to second that because I've called them a million times. I've said this before on the podcast and I said it to you off record. I call them all the time with questions.
They're generous with their time. They pick up, they make things happen. If something doesn't work, they are really like, they're part of the family. They want to see you win. They want to see your kids thrive. So the person I spoke to said, well, if you want to look at a math equation, clearly I attract all these opposites because I need that balance in my life. So he goes, if you had a magic wand and had all the money, no circumstances, you could do whatever you wanted, what's the most amount of kids you would want? I said, I think 4 is really our number. He goes, great. And do you have a minimum? And I was like, we definitely want at least 2. God willing, everything works out. He goes, so if you want 4 and you're going to do IUI, the average like success rate is like 4 to 5. I think they said 4 to 5 vials per one successful pregnancy with IUI.
Okay. So you want 20 vials if you want 4 kids.
And vial prices at the time were just shy of $1,000. And this was in 2017, 2018. They were just shy of 1,000. And because we also knew we were doing a medicated IUI and we potentially do an IVF, we also didn't need to get the most expensive vial because our doctor was going to do all the things to the sperm anyway, which did wind up saving us. Britt and I, for our wedding, instead of asking for like, a honeymoon fund or a house fund, we asked for a future family fund.
Oh my God. I didn't know that. That's so amazing. I've never heard of that before.
We called it the Future Family Fund. Our friends and family were super generous. And we had about $20,000 saved.
I love that. I'm like going to tell everyone about that if you don't mind me borrowing your idea and sharing it.
It was such a like no-brainer choice for us. And like, I can buy china whenever I want, and I can buy a blender whenever I want. building a family is expensive, which is why when we found out that $50,000 price point for doing IVF with 2 egg retrievals, I didn't even have half of that. So when we looked at IUI, we did 1 vial of sperm for 1 IUI. All of the ultrasounds, which are not covered by insurance because you're at a fertility doctor, this isn't an OB basic ultrasound. All of the ultrasounds, Clomid, the HCG trigger shot, 1 vial of sperm, I think we're right under $3,500. So with all of that information and knowing we would need 20 vials to totally secure, hopefully 4 babies, we looked at our bank account and we decided that we would invest half of our money into sperm.
I love that you call yourself not a math person, and yet, you know, you're, or not I'm not the rational one. And here you are being so logical and so rational and, you know, asking for help, but in a genuine and not like, I deserve this, give me money kind of way, but like, let's focus on this rather than China patterns. You know, it's such a cool part of the story.
Yeah. I am so driven by my emotions that all it takes is for an outside force to say something kind of more analytical and mathy for me to kind of get like, oh, that makes sense. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That moment of like sheer knowing that just feels like an ease, like, okay, got it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we that's how we found our donor. That's how many vials we decided to get.
Yeah.
Our doctor was obviously, I think he's the best. So obviously we went back to him for baby number 2. We did another medicated IUI and we got pregnant on the first try. I was certain it wasn't going to be that easy, which is why we started trying when I was 11 months postpartum. I was exclusively breastfeeding still. I figured it was going to take a few tries. I wanted my body to like get used to all the things happening in my body. And when he called and told me that we were pregnant, I said, no, we're not. He goes, yes, you are. So we had our babies 20 months apart. It was a lot. Obviously we got pregnant in November, and March, 4 months later, is when COVID hit.
So one of the things we talked about a little bit earlier in the conversation was some of the identity stuff. And we've talked a little bit about how you are a spokesperson for the fertility community in many ways, but you're also a spokesperson for the donor conception community because you are raising 2 donor conceived children. Can you tell us a little about how you think about helping them form their identity, how they are made aware of their donor conception history, their donor parentage, however, whatever framework or language you like to use? That would be really interesting. As also a parent of donor conceived child who is much younger than yours, how do I think about talking to my kids about that?
So one of the things that I mentioned that I actually think is a really big piece of my puzzle is my mom and her parents and her sisters are all in the psychoanalysis, psychotherapy world, right? So I grew up in a home and in a family, like an extended family, where we talk about everything. Nothing's off limits. No such thing as a stupid question. Your feelings are valid, all of that. So I think I mentioned this to you already is it just is so much easier when you don't lie to your kids. You know, like Thea's asking me, why is Ema putting shots in your booty? Well, we're trying to make a baby. You know, there are some people, straight, gay, in between, that don't actually tell their kids what's happening until they have a confirmed pregnancy. And I am in the belief that having to make things up, it just is a lot of work to remember. Yeah. And whether this pregnancy sticks or doesn't, I need the support of everyone and anyone. So I think talking about things is, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Inside Out with joy, and happiness, and all of those islands. I think honesty and storytelling is one of my islands. There's that little frame right there. The other important part of my story is when I was pregnant with Thea, we announced our pregnancy. I happened to be about that 12, 13 week around Mother's Day, which is obviously a fitting time to share that 2 more mommies are joining the club.
Oh, that's so cute.
And that same weekend, I found out that my father was a sperm donor.
You didn't know that until you were already pregnant.
Yeah.
So you talked to your dad about here's the IUI versus IVF. We're picking a donor. Here's our path. And it didn't come up until the pregnancy was confirmed.
And I just told you I come from a family where we talk about everything, even the uncomfortable, nitty gritty, gross. Don't talk to me about that.
Right. And you also mentioned that it's really important that your kids are aware of their donor conception.
Yeah.
So that feels like a really big revelation in your family.
So, this conversation was so out of sight, out of mind for both of my parents, because not only was my dad a sperm donor, he started donating when him and my mom were dating, and my mom knew about it.
Wow.
It not going to a sperm bank, picking out a donor, figuring out IVF or IUI, the doctor, none of it triggered any of this for my parents until they got a call and a notification on 23andMe saying you have a 50% DNA match. And they were like, oh my God, there was that time in medical school. Like, it took a notification to say, hey, here's 50% DNA saying hello. We have now since found out that I have 6, we call each other BioSibs. I know everybody has their own terms and all that stuff. Our family, we refer to each other as a BioFam. These are my bio siblings. The grandparents are Biogram. My dad is BioDad. My mom's name is Briar. Everybody calls her Mama B. I mean, we're in love with each other. It's like my brothers and sisters have been in my life, my whole life. I'm the oldest of my mom and dad had me and my 2 brothers. So I'm the oldest. I have begged my parents for years for an older brother, and they said it's not possible. So they're liars. So now I have 2 older brothers. I have 4 older sisters. So I was quickly thrown into the water of like all things donor conception, from being the daughter of a sperm donor to the sibling of donor conceived people to the parent of a donor conceived kids, a donor recipient. I mean, I don't know how many other hats I can wear in this world. And it was funny, at first I didn't actually know what to think of it until, of course, my genius wife said, babe, we're literally having donor conceived kids. So when they start asking questions and they don't know how to feel, or they, want to ask questions that we really can't answer being in their shoes, they have biological aunts and uncles they can go to.
That's amazing.
Like that. I was like, great, sold. I love these people. Who are they? Let's meet. So we found this out about 4 years ago, and we have all met. We do family reunions once a year. I got back 2 days ago from one of my sister's weddings. I was the only biosib to be asked to do a reading at the wedding. So obviously I'm the most favorite. And we are whatever modern family looks like. I think this is as close to it as it gets.
I'm just going to push on you a little bit. It feels too good to be true. Like your whole story, like, I just fell in love with my best friend. Yeah, my parents were super supportive. You know what? I don't know what my identity is, but I'm really happy as a member of the LGBTQ queer community. Discovered BioSibs, and like, that's awesome. We're a happy dappy family. Like, is your life really this filled with joy and happy circumstances?
I think for the most part, I am human. I have my breakdowns. I have my meltdowns. I have my weekly therapy sessions with my therapist. I have all of it. And every moment that gets thrown to anybody is made up of a matter of moments and choices. And I was always the kid in school that people were like, it is 8 a.m. Why is your cup half full? Well, because it's a Debbie Downer to be half empty. So part of it is, I think that's just like my DNA makeup.
Like a naturally caffeinated, naturally peppy, joyful person.
The amount of times people have said I am naturally caffeinated, man, I need to like trademark that. But your whole life is made up of choices. So like either lean into it or don't. But like, when I look back onto my life, I don't want to have a whole lot of regrets. Not to say that I'm not going to make mistakes, but those mistakes are going to lead me to places. I am such a big believer in everything happens for a reason. Everything. Yeah. I will be having a full down meltdown, sobbing, can't breathe. I look like a toddler that's just like, you cannot get into the right part of my brain to have me regulate myself. And there will be a moment where I go, this is happening for a reason. I will look back and be thankful for this moment. So do I want to live my life full of abundance with people that I love that can contribute to me? Hell yeah, I do. And like, it is a really cool idea that my kids are going to grow up with aunts and uncles who can share their side of the story. Interestingly enough, most of them weren't told that they were donor conceived. They found out because 23andMe and Ancestry, some of them, they've been on a hunt for a while. Some of them didn't, like, it was like, a cute Christmas or Hanukkah gift, and they took it and they were like, whoa, why am I Jewish?
Why am I Jewish?
Like, for some of them, they were like, they just didn't know. And this was like, oh, this was a gift that I don't think I was anticipating getting.
Right.
Most of them didn't find out until their 20s.
And are most of them equally as happy as you to discover this other side of their family? Or has it been emotional or challenging for any of your siblings?
Yes, to all of it. I think what's really interesting is they're all very different stories. Most of my donor siblings have come from heterosexual couples with male factor infertility. So part of me also, and I don't know if this is my glass half full talking again, I think part of the donor conceived community, the issues that are coming up that people are discovering and kind of like opening up, I have a hunch, no data, no science, no fact, that a lot of these people are figuring this out in their later in life. And it's because nobody talked about male factor infertility. We're in 2022 and it's still so stigmatized.
Stigmatized.
I think that the gay community, we are singing it from the rooftops. We are like, we're gay, we're trying to make a baby. This is how we're doing it. I even think that solo parents by choice are like, this is my life. I'm taking control. This is what I'm doing. There's so much more celebration.
Absolutely.
Not to say that it's not hard or daunting or scary, but there's a lot more celebration and community, and there's not a whole lot of stigma around it. Male factor, there's always been, and there still is. But I think that anonymity is a thing of the past, whether there are open donors or closed donors. I think that if a sperm donor's great aunt's niece takes a test, you're going to get connected. So I don't think anonymity is going to be a thing anymore. So I do think that while this is important, and there needs to be ways that there needs to be things that we can implement to help regulate for the future. I already think there's a huge shift in so many people sharing their stories.
So that's something one of the things I really wrestled with in choosing my donor was I chose a donor who wanted anonymity, but he was perfect for me on every other vector. And so then you think one of two things. You say, on one hand, I want to respect this young man's choice to be anonymous, and I will honor the legal documents that I signed, which says that I won't seek him out. On the other hand, it's likely that he will get discovered because the technologies are out there. I don't want to be flippant about it. I'm not saying, well, whatever, he's going to be discovered. How did your dad feel about, did he choose anonymity and then he was discovered? Like, did it feel like a violation of him?
There was only anonymity back then. There was nothing else.
Right. So did he feel like this thing that I chose, this legal choice, was violated because technology changed and now I could be found? I know you can't speak for him, but
again, my dad is in the medical world and donated while he was in medical school. And for him, he was like,
yeah,
I'm either going to help a family or nothing's going to come of this. And I'm getting paid to help pay down my student debt. For him, it was a win-win. I don't think people back then ever thought something like 23andMe and Ancestry would be a thing, ever. So it's not the same anonymity contract that was signed back then. And the requirements to be a sperm donor, the things that my dad remembers, he's like, you had to be HIV negative. You had to have a certain IQ. That was kind of it. Like, and one of my siblings has the form that her mom had of like their donor keepsake. It's an 8.5 by 11 double-sided.
Yeah.
You and I got jump drives. Like,
yeah.
It's just, I mean, a lot's happened in 30 years. Some of my siblings were relieved to find out that the father that raised them was not their biological father. They had some hard upbringings and they really didn't want to be anything like him. And to find out that biologically they're not was a relief for them. For others, it made them love their dad even more. Like, you really went to the end of the world to have me. And what a blessing. Interestingly enough, so I found 6, 4 are girls and 2 are boys. Both boys were told at young ages, like age appropriate ages, 8, 9, 10, like really in depth. And the girls were the ones that all found out kind of in shocking ways. So I think there's something to be said about that. One of the boys has two moms. So like he kind of always knew some, right? Like at a certain point, right. Some were relieved. Most have no siblings. So you go from being, some don't have any parents left. So they were not only didn't have any siblings or they were orphans. And now you have a crazy family that wants to like love you. It's intense. It's intense. It's always intense when we get together. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Okay. So given how much, we could spend hours unpacking this. And unfortunately, that's not something either you or I have the capacity to do, although it's such a good story.
Thank you.
I'm curious, this crazy jumbled donor conceived family that you have created and found, how has that shaped your personal definition of family?
Oh man, family is just what you make of it. And it's, I think, a choice you kind of have to choose over and over and over again. That's what a marriage is. I literally chose someone and I choose her every single day, even when I don't like her. And I think that's kind of like family, right? Like you don't have to like everyone all the time, but you always love them. I've never, ever thought that family means mom, dad, and 2.2 kids and a white picket fence. Family are your parents. Family are your siblings. Family are your best friends from when you're, in kindergarten to that changes when you're in high school to college. Family is the person you marry. Family are the little tiny people you create. Family, it's everyone. It's whoever you want it to be. I think that there's a certain level of trust and intimacy that you have with these people. You can say anything and you'll just still be loved.
Still loved. I love that. Okay. Well, where can we find you? If we're interested to follow your journey or learn more about the donor conception world or the fertility world, where can we find you?
You can find us at the Sharon Moms. So Sharon is spelled like Sharon, Sharon. So we're the Sharon Moms, and we are on Instagram. We're ish on TikTok. We're still learning that because I'm on the older side of millennial. And we have a website, which I don't keep updated because now I have two kids and
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. Our daily up-to-date story is on Instagram at the Sharon Moms.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was such a pleasure to hear this incredible story of yours.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for reaching out. This is always just such a blast.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.
Many of you know that I use donor sperm to conceive my perfect little angel, and I absolutely credit his donor for, at least 50% of what makes him so special. I used California Cryobank to find the right donor for me. California Cryobank is a full-service sperm bank which specializes in frozen donor sperm, private semen analysis and cryopreservation, and directed donor services. California Cryobank has the largest and most diverse selection of sperm donors, which is really important when you're making this life-changing decision, such as who your child's DNA is going to be, what their genetic makeup can be. They make the selection process easier because, believe me, it can be an overwhelming process. And they make that process a lot easier with search filters and profiles that really help you make a great decision. Profiles that they provide include things like genetic test summaries, medical histories, personal essays, childhood and adult photos, and DNA ancestry reports, all of which are really helpful and a really important decision. Stork'd is excited to share a free Level 2 subscription to California Cryobank's donor catalog. By using the promo code STORK'd, STORKD, at cryobank.com, you will receive free access to that donor catalog for 90 days, which is a great value. It's a $145 value. Definitely encourage that you try it out, and good luck finding your donor.